All right, now we're going to spend the last 25 minutes of the show today following the money. Salman, please bring in Kevin Schofield.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, Kevin? Yeah, great to see you once again, my friend.
Once again, like 2 days in a row. Wow. So, I mean, you guys are having such a great show here. Brett Hamill, Carolyn Big. I am the biggest fan of Carolyn. If you are not following her stuff over at South Seattle Emerald, you are missing it. She is, a treasure for this city. She does such amazing work. You have to follow her. Eric, Trey, I know you said you were a theater kid. I was a theater tech kid. So I was the one behind the scenes of like making everything work so you could shine on stage. And my daughters are both theater kids. So like, I love the theater. It is just so inspiring to see Eric be able to come on and talk about, Mean Girls, talk about representation in theater, which has changed so much for the better over the last 10 years. And now you guys are stuck with me, right? And I think I might have to I might have to admit to being wordy, nerdy, and cranky today.
But we're gonna learn a lot, and the best thing, you can keep both screens up, Salman. The best thing is that I think what Kevin Scholfield said is that our show was vibing, and we said though too, it's like this show is different right now, Kevin. By the way, I'll just say this, and we'll jump into the budget. Is this show came back on now as a labor of love. As opposed to just a labor of news and everything else. You know what I'm saying? And so it's got a whole different kind of just feel to it. It's more relaxed than where everything else. So, it's got a good flow.
No, I just got to chime in there because you know what? It's palpable in the studio. Like we can feel the great energy. So I'm glad that you said that, Kevin. I'm glad you're recognizing it, brother.
Yeah. And if I get too cranky, just like bring me back, put me in line on the stuff because I just, all right. I've had my fill of Seattle politicians, over the last week, and I think it's showing a little bit here. But.
So we're gonna jump right into this, Kevin. You bring his speaker up a little bit, Salman. Tell us what's going on. All the news that the people got on their Twitter machines last night, and all the news was breaking out in press releases and everything else. They talked about Council Member Mosquitos released a balancing package, and one of the big things was $10 million taken away from the police. Maybe you can give us an overview of what happened. We'll talk about that. Then we also want to talk about investments in the Black community and if the city council is keeping their word.
Yeah. So what happened yesterday was we saw the balancing package from Councilmember Mosquito, the budget chair. You remember 2 weeks ago, they had about 190 different amendments that city council was talking about. We knew they weren't all going to get through. So the next step was for Mosquito to take some set of them and build a balancing, a kind of new balancing budget, starting with the mayors with some, that balances out, spending and revenues. So it all comes out even as they're required to do under law. And so she put that out yesterday. It's got about 133 amendments in there. And, and there's some, there's a bunch of stuff in there we expected, and there's some controversial stuff in there as well. So now, I was burned the midnight oil last night, kind of going through, trying to figure out everything that was in there, what it all meant. Mosquito's been pushing two narratives really hard between the speech yesterday she gave on kind of rolling this thing out, and then basically another speech she gave this morning in the city council meeting, rolling this out to her colleagues and taking a couple questions on it. Number one is she's been pushing very hard on how the payroll tax that she has labeled the jumpstart tax is the reason why all the good things are in the budget, and which and it was $234 million a year, at least in theory. We'll see when the revenues really come in February whether it meets that. It could be higher or lower, but we also had $116 million in ARPA funding this year, and we're going to get $116 million next year. So. A lot of good things have, a lot of good funding and spending has come from the payroll tax, no doubt. But we got a lot of money from the federal government that also helped. The second narrative that she's been pushing really hard is about this, revenue update that the city got last week. They get, the city council gets a revenue update in August, and they get one in November. And the August one is what the mayor uses to design her proposed budget. And the November one is kind of a last minute update before the council finishes their budget to say, okay, let's kind of true that up to, with just 2 months left in the year, where do we think we really are? And the update they got last week said that, it looked at about 30 different sources of revenues. And, like with any budget for any business, you get to the end of the year, some things are going to be higher, some things are going to be lower. And across these 30 different revenue sources, it was a total mix of some things higher and some things lower. But at the net, there are kind of unrestricted general fund revenues that they could spend on whatever they want. For this year, it was down a little over $14 million, and it's going to be down, they project, a little over $5 million next year. And that's mostly because in October, a whole bunch of our big employers in the city, like Amazon, delayed returning their workers to the office until, at the very least, January. And so that meant that there were less workers in Seattle that would be paying the payroll tax, and that there were less cars parking downtown, so they got less from the commercial parking tax. And then on the other hand, there were also some kind of restricted fund revenues that were higher. A big one being real estate excise tax, or what they call REIT, which came in about almost $19 million higher this year, and it looks like there's going to be a big bump next year. So, it in the end, there's, if you balance if you kind of net those out for this year, they're down a couple $1 million in revenues, and looks like they might even be up up a little bit for next year. But restricted revenues and general fund revenues aren't, you can't spend them both on the same things, right? So you have to look to see, well, one of the things we talked about in budget school about dollar swaps. If I got some restricted fund dollars here, can I replace some of those general fund spending things so I can free up some money that I can go spend on whatever I want? And so what Mosquito has been saying this week is, oh, we got this bad news revenue update last week. We're $15 million down, and that's the reason we can't spend money on a bunch of things we want to spend. Really, it's not true, because it took her about 30 seconds to find ways that she could substitute in that REIT fund for REIT extra money they got this year for all the general fund money. And so that evened out really, really quickly. What's really going on here has to do more kind of with the way they position these August, November revenue updates. Because like I said before, the August revenue update is what the mayor uses to figure out how much money she can spend in her proposed budget, which she unveils in September. And the November one is kind of trued up and lets the city council figure out, okay, how much, when we finalize the budget, how much should we get to spend? And over the year and a half prior to August, the city had been using a pessimistic view of what the revenues would be because of COVID and the economic downturn and everything like that. But in August, when the economy was really ramping up, there were a lot of signs that things were going to get a little better. They switched back to using their baseline, kind of middle of the road. It's not optimistic, it's not pessimistic, it's baseline. And rightly, the city council asked some questions at that point, like, are we really sure this is the right thing to do? And it turns out, again, like we just talked about, they missed on the general funds by revenues by about $14 million, but that's about 0.8% of the $1.7 billion of general fund revenues. So, if your job was to estimate revenues for the year and you came within, less than 1%, you did great, right? You get to keep your job in any business if you do that, right? So while Mosquito is saying, hey, there was this big revenue miss last year and it's a big problem, A, she substituted money she covered it really fast. And B, the problem isn't that it was low. The problem was that it was right? And what she was really hoping for, and what budget chairs hope for every year, is that there's going to be this November upside surprise, and suddenly they're going to have more money to spend, right? Because the mayor, in her budget, spent all the money that they thought they were going to have in August. She doesn't leave a pile of money sitting around for the city council to spend. She's going to propose spending every cent that they've got. And unless there's an upside in November, then there's no free money. And the city council has to either raise taxes or fees to find some new revenues, or cut spending somewhere else. And so, Mosquito is trying to spin this as, oh, we should use a pessimistic budget, revenue forecast, because that would have given her more money to spend now. Where in fact, the budget forecast was right in August. And now she's really stuck because she doesn't have as much money as she wants to spend. So she's put some cuts in her balancing package. And one is one that we've talked about. And she made it pretty clear. She telegraphed 2 weeks ago that she was going to do this. She cut about $47 million of money that the mayor proposed for participatory budgeting, for equitable communities initiative, for some of the other.
Bro, this is the black people money. Put me up on the. Put me up. Split the screen. This you said 47 million. This is the black people. This is the. I'm sorry, the Bipark Funds, right?
This is your turn to round. My turn to round is coming in a minute. This is your turn to round.
No, I'm just saying. I want to make sure this is what you're talking about. This.
Yep.
We got a slide for this. Go ahead, put this slide up, Salman.
Yep.
There you go.
So this is, they didn't cut everything. There are a bunch of amendments that City Council put in that still made it in for additional spending for BIPOC communities. You can see up at the top, there's this $47 million cut. And what happened with, for Mosquito, with the money that she did find through this and through, something we're going to talk about in a minute, which is this $10 million cut to SPD, the pot of money that she did have that came out of that, she peanut buttered kind of in small amounts over a very large number of things. And I kind of feel like this is like giving out fun-sized candy on Halloween, right? Everybody gets a little taste, of these little things, but nobody really comes away satisfied from this, right? So a lot of the city council members earmarked for their district and for organization, human services and other kinds of organizations they're close to, they all got some money, but a lot of them didn't get as much as they really asked for on that. So, you can see there's a bunch of stuff that's still in here. It's mostly kind of in the scale of the $1.7 billion general fund and $7 billion total budget for the city. This is pretty small amounts of money here, particularly given that they cut $47 million. But, there's some things that are still in there, some specific programs that are still in there.
So my question then, Kevin, is, how does community follow this? I mean, there's a lot going on. Clearly, there's a lot of layers to this. I love that breakdown because we're seeing it. I'm like 620,000 for Juneteenth. Okay, well, how do people even apply? Where does that go? I mean, when they're talking about earmarking some of these funds, I'm always thinking, well, how does it really impact community?
Yeah. So, what happens is almost all these money is going to go into the budgets for specific departments like the Department of Neighborhoods or the Office for Civil Rights. And it's going to be up to the heads of those departments to figure out, okay, here's how we're going to spend that money. And are we going to do some kind of, bidding out process for it to go out? So, the way you plug into these after the budget gets done is you watch the city departments. You go check out their website. A lot of them have newsletters that you can sign up for to find out, regularly from them, about new kinds of funding opportunities, like the relief fund that we've been talking about. Which is a pretty big deal.
So I hear what you're saying, Trey, and it's valid. Like, okay, where does this go? Does it go down some rabbit hole? I think two things. One, can you put the slide back up, Salman? The very bottom here, it takes a second for me to be able to see it here. It looks like there was a reduction in budget, and this looks like this was a program. Okay, it says here $375,000 for programming for Black girls and young women and Black queer and transgender youth. And it was $1 million. So there was $1 million for Black girls, young women, and Black queer and transgender youth, and now it's $375,000.
Okay, now let me be clear. This was an amendment that was originally put in 2 weeks ago for $1 million, and Mosquito cut it back down to $375K. So it's not like there was already $1 million.
So it wasn't $1 million that was already there, and it's been reduced.
This is a new amendment. But this is, come up to my point of fun-sized candy on Halloween. This is because Mosquito didn't have as much money as she wanted to spend. She still gave a lot of money to a lot of.
Why do Black folks got to suffer though? I mean, like the city council had all these rally calls like 12 months ago. Black Lives Matter. We here for the Blacks and pay the fee and all this stuff and all these big promises and everything else. I mean, like the stuff they was promising, I'm sure somebody knew had to be paid for.
Well, we did get the plaque in front of city council saying Black Lives Matter.
Hey, but that was the they thing.
That's cool.
But yeah, I mean, at least that wasn't performative by us. At least it's an actual mural that's there. Like they actually put it there. You know what I'm saying? Some of this stuff, I'm just saying, Kevin, that man, we heard a lot out of city council last year. And, and they used it. A lot of people used the political capital of blackness and black people to propel their career and propel their agenda and everything else. And it looks like it's time to, do some payback here. And he said, this thumb-sized candy. Man, I hate the little Snicker. I want the whole Snicker.
Fun size. That's what you get. And, Kevin, I love that you actually explained it like that, because it is a sprinkling. This is exactly what I think a lot of community groups are talking about that have been having meetings, and folks that were trying to bring a lot of the attention to what protesters were out there on the ground talking about. If you sprinkle it around in this way, what kind of real sustainable impact does it have?
Hold on. Isn't this the same person who was worried about a physical cliff? Like, is this the polar opposite of that? It's like, oh, okay, if we give them too much here, they might, not be able to spit it. Now, if you give them too little, then what can you actually accomplish?
Exactly. This, Councilmember Mosquito, in cutting back the participatory budgeting money and the equitable communities initiative money, said, we're worried about a fiscal cliff. We don't want to, set up an expectation that there's going to be $57 million for participatory budgeting this year, and then they might get the same amount next year when it would only be $30 million. Like, people, like, you can't tell them at the beginning of 2022, hey, here's what's going to happen, and they'll figure it out and do the right thing. Of course, they'll figure it out and do the right thing. So, but to your point, yeah, this is kind of the opposite. It's like, if you sprinkle out this amount of money, and peanut butter out very thinly, it makes it hard for a lot of these programs to move forward. And a great example of that is the LEAD program, which is this pre-arrest diversion program that a lot of people have been super excited about for a number of years and has been chronically underfunded. It started out as a pilot, and for years now, the city council has been saying, hey, let's get this up to full funding so that we could take referrals into LEAD across the entire city and not just a couple of neighborhoods. And there was a proposal to spend $14.5 million this year to really, get it citywide. And at the end of the day, they didn't do it. They just added $3.5 million to it. So, and this is the problem. Wow. Like we're gonna get marginal partial successes with a bunch of these programs if we don't make any big bets around this. Now, there are a couple places where there's a lot of money going in. One of them where Mosquito really did a good job of kind of defending a lot of it is in food assistance. And that's, we're at a really kind of critical point right now where, there's been a lot of huge need for food assistance over the last year and a half through the COVID, pandemic and the economic downturn. And the council and the mayor put a lot of money into it. And that's great because it's really helped a lot of people eat, and that's important. And now the issue is, well, so what happens after this? As the economy picks back up again, do we ramp down food assistance a little bit? Do we?
Hold on. She wasn't concerned about a physical cliff for food.
Well, no. Well, this is actually my question. I mean, you're really going right to it, because my thing is, I want to remind us all that these are one-time funds we're talking about here, Kevin. Correct? So the idea is that we're sprinkling some things around, hoping to make a little bit of change here and there, and then really not able to sustain any of this. That's a part of what we're talking about, right?
It's a mix. There is some one-time funds here, and there's some ongoing funds here. And you really have to dive into the details of all these budget amendments to figure out, okay, is this one-time funding or is this ongoing funding? It's pretty tricky to follow all that.
I'm sorry to cut you right there. No disrespect, Kevin, but man, I'm still caught up in the fact that all of these people used black folks for their political momentum and everything. Like, man, where's the delivery? Like, hello, man, I'm waiting for all of these things here. I'm waiting also for all the people who made all this noise a year ago about participatory budgeting. Someone's just proposing to take $30 million out of your pot. Hello, where are you? This was a big battle last year. You know what I'm saying? Within our community and down there on City Hall. And now 1 year later, and it's $30 million and everybody's quiet. 1 year later, all these things that were promised and man, how we're going to deliver for the black community. Let's be clear. The one thing that people talked about last year is like, we have to stay committed to this community. And people, I think everybody was in agreement around some number around 10 years. Like, man, we're not going to see things unless we can really kind of invest for at least 10 years. That was something the mayor kind of threw out, city council kind of threw out, different people, that you're not going to see a return in anything and like, oh, well, here was the one-time thing. This feels just, man, it feels like once again we've been played. And the crazy thing is, though, this is how wild it is here in the city of Seattle, is that you have Mayor Durkin, who for the most part has played the role of the villain, you know what I'm saying, in this whole saga and story. And Mayor Durkin is the only one who's turned around to keep her word, to be like, yeah, let's go put this money back into this pot. And here comes the city council who's sitting there like, nah, that was last year's story. It's a new news cycle now. You know what I'm saying? I mean, this is just mind-blowing to me, how many voices are no longer there. You know, it also makes me wonder now, why were they there last year? What was their incentive? How come they're not here now? Like, we're still here on this story. And it's just a trip to me. And I don't know if it's just the lens I'm looking through, Kevin, or, you know, are you seeing some of these same things I'm saying?
Yeah, you know, there's a public hearing tonight. And it'll be interesting to see who speaks up on behalf of these. Will anybody complain that they're taking $47 million away from these programs or not? I don't know. I'm going to be tuning in to see who shows up for that and what they say. You know, the public hearings for these always tend to be a little bit of a kind of parade of people asking for money, and a parade of their supporters. But, you know, we'll see. I think you're asking very, very valid questions about, you know, the follow through of the city council and the mayor. The mayor, you know, proposed $124 million for these programs. City council is cutting it back to $77 million. And now I guess we're going to see who really cares about that.
Yeah, after they all had their Black Lives Matter signs up in the house and this and that, and, you know, everything, man, you know, we just keep getting played. If you got a few extra minutes, looks like we're going to go overtime in a few minutes, Kevin. If you can stay with us, maybe you could explain what's going on with the proposed cuts with SPD. You
bet. So Mosquitos proposed cutting about $10.5 million from SPDs, and it's like 5 different chunks. So we can just kind of walk through this here. $4.5 million for salary savings and what they call efficiencies. So, you know, based upon kind of the starting point of the year, January 2022 compared to January 2021, because they've had all this extra attrition this year, they're starting a lower point, and SPD figures their overall salary cost is going to be about $19 million lower. And they proposed how to spend basically $18 million of that. And city council is disagreeing and saying, no, we want more of that money back to spend on other things, right? So then, you know, other things, so that's about $4.5 million. $1.3 million is a cut to a proposal from the mayor to expand the community service officer program, what they call the CPSO program, which is a civilian-based group that works in SPD to go out and work with the community and take crime reports and other reports and build relationships with the community that free up sworn officers to go do other things where they're more needed to do that. It was proposed by the mayor and this is a program that everybody loves, right? To add another 6 people to that. The council is saying, we're going to cut that this year. Officially, they are saying, that's on hold because they've had this debate about, should they stay in SPD or should they maybe move to this new Community Safety and Communication Center, which,
I'm sorry, can you bring up the 2 screens here real quick? Or maybe the city council should actually hang out in District 2 and District 3, and they should talk to some of the people who are impacted down there. You know what I'm saying? I mean, this is ivory tower talk here. When especially in D2 and D3, you got people dying, gun violence victims, some of everything else. I don't know. Are guys pontificating? Are they walking the streets down there? Are people actually on the block? I mean, CSO is a program that everybody on this issue kind of is like, hey, this is a good idea. Let's have more CSOs in the neighborhood.
Yeah, and the CSOs want to stay in SPD. And the council says, we really want to move you to the CSCC. And so now the council is saying, we're not going to let this program grow until we officially kind of make a final decision.
That's because it ain't they kids that's out there dying in the South Bend. That's because it ain't they babies that's out there getting shot and out there dying. And they got the luxury of it. They have the luxury because there's no sense of urgency over in City Hall because it's not they kids that's getting killed. So there's no sense of urgency in City Hall. Well, let's study this. Let's do this and that. When here you have a program to get people into the neighborhood, a CSO, there's nobody that's going to tell you the CSO program is bad. You go to any community group, they're going to be like, yeah, CSO. You go to the city, the SPD, CSO, everything else. But these people sitting here in this ivory tower are going to sit and pontificate, paralysis by analysis, mistaking activity for achievement around the CSO program.
I think you're giving them way too much credit. I think this is basically an excuse for cutting $1.3 million. Right, so they can spend on other stuff that was on their priority list. Right, I don't even really think it's analysis.
Our babies.
Yeah, I mean there is like you said, nobody dislikes this program, right? So it makes no sense to wait to grow it, right? It's succeeding where it is in SPD right now. Why would you wait to grow things? So so there's that. A little over $1 million for hiring incentives. We knew the city council was going to cut that. Hiring bonuses for new and they did. They're cutting that. $1.25 million for a couple of technology projects that they're kind of. I actually agree with Mosquito on this one. They're kind of nice to have, but in a year where it's a little tight, that's okay. They can push those out. And then here's where it gets really weird. The last $2.7 million is for additional salary savings in SPD. And this is a case where, over the last year and a half, as there's been all this blowback from the initial, city council members coming out and saying, we want to defund by 50%. They've had this refrain over and over again, which is, we are fully funding SPD's staffing plan. Right. And SPD puts a staffing plan together every year that says we expect to be able to hire this many people through our pipeline, and we expect this many number of separations for attrition. And their SPD's staffing plan for next year says we expect to hire 125 and we expect 94 separations. And that would be, there's reasons to be critical of that, right? The 125 number would be a high one for them. The 94 number would be a low one for them. But that's a staffing plan that came out. And so after, a year and a half of them saying, we're fully funding SPD's staffing plan, this time they said, no, we don't believe that 94 figure. So we're going to cut it we're going to say, no, it's really going to be 125. And that lets them pull back $2.7 million, right? So there are two things. Number one, now they're no longer fully funding SPD's staffing plan. And they got, in this morning's meeting, I listened to it, they got really squirrely trying to parse that and say, well, we're fully funding the hiring plan, but not necessarily the staffing plan. So they're trying to spin the message. So be careful when you listen to them on this, because they're spinning the message. And the other thing is, switching it to 125 is super convenient for their messaging, because now the number of hires and the number of separations is the same. And for the people in the community who've been saying, hey, you can't let SPD grow back next year, even though, they're growing back to way, so they're still going to be way below where they were a year ago because of all the extra attrition, right? Now they can say, no, we're not letting them grow. We're holding them in even. 125 hires, 125 separations, right? So there's a very, very convenient messaging that you look at that and go, and they had to admit that this morning in the meeting too. Neither SPD nor the council have had any track record of being able to accurately predict what the attrition is going to be from SPD. Nobody can guess correctly on this. So they just picked a number out of their ass, 125, because it was super convenient and they got a bunch of money back. And that's the number that they put in there.
I think Triana has something here to say, at least about CSO, maybe some other stuff.
You know what? I'll just say this, that, here we are once again. I think Omari is 100% correct on this, that, this is just not taking into account the voice of the people, Kevin. That's what I'm really hearing here, is that once again, folks that are sitting around the table that are wielding this power, are they actually thinking about the constituents that they're there to serve? And it feels like it's about okay, well, how can we best do our jobs without really incorporating the voices, the lived experience of folks out there on the ground? Even what you're talking about here, that it's about this surface level kind of performative action. Well, 125 over here and 125 over here, like it's a wash, when really that's not what's going on. And there's so many different layers that are underneath all of that. I thank you for bringing it out, but it just, again, it's disheartening. And as we always say, it's disingenuous when they actually have the opportunity need to be listening to people and bring that into how they're making decisions.
And you know why this is disingenuous too? Is because it ain't like these people, we've been out there and we've been calling, we've been waving the flag. Hey, city council, come on. Where you at? People are dying in this city. Where are you? Say something. Say anything, city council. Say anything. And they stay quiet in this ivory tower while our children die, while our neighborhoods get shot up, while these impacts on people, on neighborhoods, on businesses, and everything else. And this city council has stayed quiet about the things that matter the most in this city and how people are impacted. And you sit here with this CSO program. You know what I'm saying? At the most agreeable level of how can we get into neighborhoods and how can we start talking to people, maybe working de-escalation and working things. The easiest way of entry here. And that's how you can tell that they ain't talked to nobody.
Yep.
And that's how you can tell they ain't met with none of these mamas who be out there crying. They done lost their children. They ain't been out there and talked to people. It's performative. People show up to that school up there in the north end when there was the homeless encampment. You know what I'm saying? All the cameras and everything. Ain't nobody show up over there, Emerson Elementary, 70 gunshots fired out there. Because don't nobody care about our babies. And we see this by the action there. And you know, the thing is the people all this time here, people use the energy of the black folks, of the Black Lives Matter, of now the time and everything else to push their agenda. But I'm going to let you know, we watching. We watching you.
Yeah, you know, I totally agree with both of you on this. You know, you're making fabulous points. There's a lot of just and I mean, let's be honest here. There's some super difficult policy questions to be asked, right? Like, what is the right size of SPD? What should the alternatives be? How long? You know, how long is it going to take us to grow those alternatives? How much is it going to cost us to do that? And, you know, just coming back to Mosquito, you know, peanut buttering around a little bit of money, they're putting a little bit of money into some of the, you know, 911 dispatch alternatives, but not enough to like really fund all the stuff. And yet they're showing this great impatience with downsizing SPD in some ways for performative reasons around this, or at least it's hard to tease out how much is authentic and how much is performative. And so, you know, we're not having the honest conversations around this. We're not hearing from the city council, okay, what is the plan for 911 dispatch when we're done with this, right? For when you call 911 and there's a shooting or there's a crime going on or any of the other reasons, or we see somebody in a mental health crisis, or we see somebody, you know, in any of the other situations where today SPD is responding, and we don't necessarily want them to be the ones responding to this. Like, who is it going to be? What are all the pieces of that jigsaw puzzle? It's not going to be like one other alternative group. It's going to be a portfolio of them. But what's the set, right? Is it 5 organizations or, you know, 5 different things? Is it 10? Is it 2? We're not hearing that from them, and they're not making the kind of investments that let us sort of really see either the plan or what individual pieces might be. They're just kind of like, you know, ambling along in this thing in a really haphazard way.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, what's going to end up happening, and this is just the truth, is that nothing, right? Like at the end of the day, I mean, there's this investment, you know, HSD put out this whole thing, you know, RFP process, all these community groups were, you know, vying for that money, and they have really solid options. But again, those options are not being elevated to the state and to the level that's really going to impact the city. And you're right, Kevin, in terms of just like kind of ambling around, you know, I love how you said that, kind of spreading the peanut butter thinly all over the place. But ultimately, I'm always still left with the fact that that leaves our communities in the same state. It doesn't elevate anything that we were trying to bring from the community level so that these CSO programs can exist. That is the lowest hanging fruit and the most easiest way to really address so much of what you're describing right there. I mean, we've talked about all of the data, all of the numbers that showcase when you actually have people who are connected to their communities being able to be equipped to respond properly to those kind of calls. We will see a reduce in violence. We will see a reduce in this kind of police brutality that we've seen time and time again. That's what brought all these people out to the streets in 2020. And it's unfortunate that we're not really learning the lessons, man. That's the thing, is that we're just
we getting played.
We're repeating the same actions.
We the pawns. We getting played. You know what I'm saying? And all these people can put themselves, they picture on the face of, oh, you know, we listen to the black community and this, and that. You know, man, the real work and even here, because we're the visible layer of it. And I wish I could say that my sleeves was rolled up as high as my mama's sleeves, and people who you'll never never see, never heard their name or anything else. The real work be sitting there, and it occurs. And these guys are using the people who really make the work. They use this Black Lives Matter. They use this protest. They use the tragedies that came out of the Seattle protests. They've used all that. And when it's time now to really pay the fee, to keep your word, where you at?
Yeah. I will add one word of caution here and kind of how we're thinking about this. And it's something I learned, in the business environment. It's true in this environment too. Never assume malice when simple incompetence will suffice. Right. It's easy to point the finger at folks and say they're bad, they're wrong, they're like doing this. Like a lot of this is just incompetence. Right. We have city council members, who really don't have experience running large organizations, right? And God bless them for their activist roots and the perspectives that they bring on people's problems, but they don't necessarily, identifying problems and solving problems, figuring out a plan for solving them are really two different skill sets.
I will say this though, Kevin, and I agree with you. And one of the things that you're talking about is a process. Have you ever, dealt with what is this budget, $7 billion budget before, or dealt with this or that, or had to manage 150,000 people that are in a district and all those things, right? That's the process. But what I'm talking to is principles of honesty, integrity, courage, dignity, and respect. And you know what? Those things right there, you don't need to know how to run a process to be able to have your virtues aligned and intact. And I think that's some of the things that's missing here, because even if it's like, the money is not there, then the conversation is supposed to start with the Black community first, because that's what someone who has character does. They say, hey guys, let's huddle right here. Man, let me tell you, I had the best intentions, but my plans jammed up. We promised you a lot of things, but let's see how we can come together here and figure it out based upon these resources that are there. You see what I'm saying? That's what character does. And you know what? You don't have to know how to operate a $7 billion budget to just look people in the eye and set a new expectation. That's all I'm talking about, Kevin.
And I agree with you. And instead, what we're getting is, no, it's the city budget office's fault because they didn't use a pessimistic revenue forecast, right? They're just like pointing the finger over there, saying, "Oh, it's their fault."
That's what I'm saying. Lead, follow, or get out of the way. Well, hey, we got to get out of here, Kevin, man. I appreciate you joining. I got a feeling that this conversation is going to continue, and we got to continue here with our budget school. Thank you for staying overtime with us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kevin.
Thank you for having me on.